legal system has been weaponized against political opponents. And that did resonate with the public. They did view this case as lawfare. And this sentence will only increase that mandate.
The Trump sentencing decision in the Stormy Daniels hush money case has been handed down by Judge Juan Merchan. In a decision that ultimately didn't surprise anyone, the ruling was for an unconditional discharge. This was important for many reasons, not the least of which was the Supreme Court's decision to allow the sentencing to be handed down.
But also, obviously important to those five justices was Justice Merchan's promise, essentially, that there would be an unconditional discharge, that there would be no other penalties that attend the conviction, that the sentencing would be final today, and there would be no encumbrance upon the office of the president. And that mattered.
What was important to the Supreme Court was that there would be no impediments to the performance of Trump as the President of the United States. The fact that the sentence was imposed also now gives Trump leave to appeal. Meanwhile, the left media are absolutely losing the plot, including CNN's Dana Bash. Something from the tone gives me the idea that they just might not be very happy.
President-elect Donald J. Trump appeared virtually to be sentenced in his criminal hush money case. In a dramatic statement, the judge made clear that Donald Trump would be sentenced without any jail time or any other penalty for that matter. And that's because of one reason, and only one reason: his status as soon-to-be 47th President of the United States. Trump spoke on his own behalf, showing no contrition, bragging about his election win, and slamming the justice system.
It's been a political witch hunt. It was done to damage my reputation so that I'd lose the election, and obviously that didn't work. And the people of our country got to see this firsthand because they watched the case in your courtroom.
If you enjoy this content, please like, share, and subscribe. It really helps. Bash is clearly disturbed by this sentence, stating that this was only because Trump was about to become president. She rails about Trump showing no contrition and talking in his statement to it being a political witch hunt. The problem with her view on this is that the American people have already made a decision on whether this was a witch hunt or not, and they clearly do not agree with Bash. Then we have Merchan actually handing down the sentence.
Indeed, extraordinary legal protections afforded by the office of the chief executive is a factor that overrides all others. To be clear, the protections afforded the office of the president are not a mitigating factor. They do not reduce the seriousness of the crime or justify its commission in any way. The protections are, however, a legal mandate, which, pursuant to the rule of law, this court must respect and follow.
Merchan talks about extraordinary protection for the president. He states that these protections are not a mitigating factor or reduce the seriousness of the crime. Here is the thing. What crime? Nobody, not even Merchan, could state what the crime was. We know what the misdemeanor was in terms of an attribution of an expense. However, that misdemeanor was expired and required something else to turn it into a felony. Merchan was terrible in his jury instruction, deliberately so in my view, as he wanted the conviction. So he gave the jury 3 separate something else's. Here, it should have been the case that Merchan directed the jury to unanimously determine which of these three applied. Instead, he played the part of Vanna White on Wheel of Fortune, saying that they could pick the second offence, any of the offences, and that they did not have to be unanimous in what that second offence was. Thus, you didn't have unanimity, and as a result, this conviction will no doubt be overturned. Marchand just enjoyed his time in the spotlight way too much. Then we have MSNBC going over the top.
We are about to see something we've never seen in just 10 days, a convicted felon as president of the United States. And what it tells us is that the bar has changed, right? The bar has moved. The public knew this. The voting public knew about this conviction. They knew about the evidence. They made a judgment on how important they thought it was or wasn't. And more of them decided it wasn't disqualifying than those who thought it might have been, obviously, given the results. And I think that's a remarkable moment and a shift in our political culture.
MSNBC here totally lose the plot. They talk about a lowering of the bar because the people didn't care enough about the felony to prevent them voting for Trump. They just don't get it. It isn't that the public didn't care about Trump being a felon, so-called. It is that the majority didn't see it as a felony at all. They saw it as an extreme case of political warfare, or in this case, lawfare. MSNBC have come to the wrong conclusion entirely. What this is actually a lowering of the bar in what is acceptable in destroying a political opponent. MSNBC then went even more over the top.
34 felony counts, 34 convictions. Was this sentence in line with what someone else in a similar position might get?
No, and it wasn't in line with what any person convicted of a felony in New York State would get. This is a wholly atypical sentencing, and the judge noted that, Chris, because it was like the collision of a typical trial of an ordinary citizen who happens to be, by other ordinary citizens' will, returned to the White House. And therefore, he said the only lawful sentence that he could conceive of was one of unconditional discharge. But he was very clear. This was not about him thinking that the presidency is a mitigating factor. It was just that he felt his hands were tied constitutionally.
So, the NBC hacks see this trial and the way that it was conducted as completely normal. The only abnormality in their minds is that they're having a hissy fit over the lack of a meaningful sentence due to Trump being president-elect. It is clear that they are very upset. At no time does it cross their incredibly blinkered little minds that this entire case was entirely unusual. No statement that a case of this type has never been brought against anyone, not even Hillary Clinton, whose circumstances regarding the Steele dossier and the payment and recording of that payment were exactly the same as in the Trump case. They continue.
And here we are. He walks away.
So a lot of people have talked prior to Donald Trump about there being two systems of justice, and talked about that in terms of racial terms and in terms of class terms. But what we have seen with Donald Trump is sort of three systems with a very separate system with respect to Donald Trump. There's no question that today...
A system unto himself.
Exactly. And there's no question that New York, in particular, looks really good in terms of the DA's office having pursued this case in spite of enormous obstacles.
They try to claim that this is a three-level legal system, with one system being the sole preserve of Donald Trump. Once again, it is, but not for the reasons that they think. They see Trump's level as being one where he can get away with crimes and misdemeanors, where the reality is that the Democrats gunned for him legally in a way that has never been done with anyone else. This is a shameful episode for not only the Democrats, but for the New York justice system as well. And then we have Dana Bash and CNN again.
And we learned the answer to a question that we've been asking, which is, what kind of impact is it going to be? And the answer is not only no politically, but legally. The answer is virtually nothing, aside from today, which is not nothing, but there's no penalty.
You face a more significant punishment for speeding in Manhattan than what Trump got.
Bash goes on about Trump receiving no meaningful sentence. Then you have the dutiful talking head stating that you get a more serious sentence for a speeding fine in New York. No discussion of the fact that, as much as I may disagree with them, speeding convictions are actually documented offences, not made-up crimes which not even the prosecutor or judge could state what they are. And the CNN talking head continues.
4 criminal cases, some real serious legal jeopardy, particularly in the federal cases. But as of now, this is the only consequence, and it's de minimis. It's nothing. And his defense team deserves a lot of credit for guiding him through these cases and helping him to delay. But you know who also deserves a lot of credit? The courts and some prosecutors. I mean, we look today, we were 1 justice away from this sentencing not even happening today. 4 justices agreed that this sentencing should be delayed, which really surprised a lot of legal experts who thought it was way too soon for the Supreme Court to get involved. Of course, a Trump-appointed judge down in Florida, she tossed out the classified documents case. That's on appeal, but that really shocked most legal experts. The Supreme Court waited 7 months to weigh in on immunity, made it impossible for Jack Smith to bring the January 6th case, and also gave him some immunity. And then down in Georgia, the final case, the lead prosecutor had a romantic relationship with the person she appointed to oversee the case. So yes, the Trump defense team has done an extraordinary job by their client here, but he also got a lot of breaks from questionable decisions within the judiciary and prosecutorial offices.
This talking head is having a field day with her hissy fit. Not only was Trump's legal team good, but the judiciary and prosecutory officers were also complicit. It just doesn't stop with these people. Does this talking head stop to question whether the reason the cases and the teams fell apart was because the cases, for the most part, were junk? Clearly not. She seems to think that they were all high-quality cases. Sorry to tell her, they weren't. Then we have retired Judge Grasso saying exactly what MSNBC wants him to.
After another, and he tries to spin it into a victory, and he just pounds the table harder the more he's in a corner. That's exactly what he's doing now. But speaking as a retired judge for almost 13 years and an attorney for over 40 years, from a legal point of view, everything that he said is BS. What the judge did here is he locked in Donald Trump as a convicted felon.
Grasso goes on as if the case was a masterclass of legal precedent. He talks of Trump trying to spin it as a victory. Well, Mr. Grasso, it is a victory, and you appear to be so caught up in your legal niceties and sophistry that you forget what the legal system is ultimately about. It's about your peers making a decision on these issues as a matter of innocence or guilt. Well, the election was effectively that very decision by the largest jury in history, and that jury decided that the cases were basically BS. So you may have satisfied your paymasters at MSNBC and fellow travellers on the left, but that is not what the majority of Americans, your peers and society, have decided. This is a pure case of childish tantrums on the left. Then we have Georgetown law professor Jonathan Turley.
Oh, I think that he did. This is enormously popular with his base. This was a thrill kill, and this was the thrill. And ultimately, this court imposed no punishment at all, but did give Trump's critics what they wanted. That is to label him as a convicted felon. It's sentencing by soundbite. This is now going to be repeated like a mantra in the media as he takes his oath of office, that this is the first convicted felon to take the oath, even though this case may not last. I mean, the verdict against Trump has a very good chance of being overturned. The verdict against the New York legal system is going to be far more lasting.
Turley says the sentencing was a thrill kill for Merchan and fellow travellers. Sentencing by soundbite. Turley sees this as likely being overturned and that there is going to be lasting damage to the New York legal system.
Well, I think that ultimately what you're going to come out of this case is a true mandate for Donald Trump. One of the greatest advantages that he had during this election was this trial. That is, when he was under this gag order and couldn't say anything, he said a great deal by walking out every day and facing the cameras. The public did not like it. This is the type of thing they see in other countries where the legal system has been weaponized against political opponents. And that did resonate with the public. They did view this case as lawfare. And this sentence will only increase that mandate.
Turley states that the public sees this as lawfare and that the sentence will only increase Trump's mandate. You only need to have a look at what happened with the polls going into the election every step of the way with the lawfare. As I've stated in a previous video, if the Democrats had played clever and only taken on the most viable case and prosecuted it, they may have got away with it. The fact that they threw everything, including the entire kitchen, never mind just the kitchen sink, at it, meant that the majority of American people saw this for what it is: naked political aggression, when no price is too high and no move too low to stop your opponent and no movement too debased. The price the Democrats paid was seen on November 5. Hopefully they learned their lesson, but I wouldn't be holding my breath. We finish by listening what Trump had to say.
It's been a political witch hunt. It was done to damage my reputation so that I'd lose the election, and obviously that didn't work. And the people of our country got to see this firsthand because they watched the case in your courtroom. They got to see this firsthand, and then they voted, and I won and got the largest number of votes by far of any Republican candidate in history, and won, as you know, all 7 swing states, won conclusively all 7 swing states, and won the popular vote by millions and millions of votes. And they've been watching your trial, and I think it's a disgrace to the system. I was under a gag order. I'm the first president in history that was under a gag order where I couldn't talk about aspects of the case that are very important. I guess I'm still under, so probably I won't do it now. I assume I'm still under a gag order. But the fact is that I'm totally innocent. I did nothing wrong. In the meantime, I won the election in a massive landslide, and the people of this country understand what's gone on. This has been a weaponization of government. They call it lawfare. Never happened to any extent like this, but never happened in our country before. And I'd just like to explain that I was treated very, very unfairly.
Trump states correctly that it was a political witch hunt. He talks of the vote by America and talks of his disdain for the court. He is right. The American people largely saw behind the screen. Thanks for watching.